Okay, I am back. Not that you noticed, although I did tell you, so it's less of a secret. Okay, so we are going to continue with the next chunk of assessment. Projective tests, this time, which kind of are similar to the thinking of implicit association tests, but not exactly the same. So what are projective tests? Or definition of projective test here. A test presents a person with like an ambiguous stimuli and asks him or her to describe what is seen. The person may or may not be aware of their inner processes, but the idea is that your answers reveal inner psychological needs, feelings, experiences, thought processes, or other hidden aspects of the mind. You know, I've got lots of cool projective tests. I've got a full set of, I think it's the TAT. I've got a whole set of the TAT. I've got a full, nice PDF version of the Rorschach. And I'm going to talk to you more about these specifically in a second. So I think I should just go to the next slide so you can see, like, well, more. I get ahead of myself if you have not figured that out yet. Okay, so subjects are given a visual prompt and asked to interpret the image. These interpretations are assessed by a clinician, and in many cases, there's like a classic scoring rubric, how to interpret what they found, like the most common ones. So the two most popular projective tests are the thematic apperception test, the TAT. And the idea is you tell a story about drawings of people and ambiguous events, and this measures your implicit motives and reflects what people want. So that's the thematic apperception test. There's an adaptation of it that's called the draw a person test. It's a nonverbal test of intelligence or emotional problems in kids ages 5 to 17. There's a 1980s update. It has like non-white figures, which was a big thing in the 80s because kids are more likely to be able to relate if the person that they're like supposed to describe looks like them. Like the reliability and validity, predictive validity, like shoot up. It's awesome. This was a really novel thing to like have like non-white prompts. Okay, that's enough about the draw person. Now the other test, and the guy who's the stern-looking guy in the slide here, is Rorschach. And the Rorschach test is that classic inkblot test. And this is from the 1920s. These are super old tests, like early test days. And here's one example. This is Rorschach Psychodiagnostics Plate 2. And various studies have kind of identified the most common popular response. And so like there's a study by Beck that says the most popular response is 2 humans. Petrovsky says it's 4-legged animals, and 34% focused on the gray parts. And Dana, which is a French sample, found that animal was the most common kind of response, and in that animal group, it was dog, elephant, or bear, and about half of this respondents focused on the gray. Now, the description with this card, I'm going to read it here. The red details of card 2 are often seen as blood, and are the most distinctive feature. Responses to them can provide indications about how a subject's likely to manage feelings of anger or physical harm. The card can induce a variety of sexual responses. Yeah. And there's no detail about what those sexual responses is, which I appreciate personally because I don't really want to know. Like how like Rorschach defined that term. The Rorschach Diagnostic Plate 2 may look extra familiar to a handful of you that may have played this Fallout New Vegas game. Now I'm going to show you a couple more cool slides just because I think they're neat and tell you what the most common responses are. So here is Rorschach Diagnostic. Oh, I lied. I'm apparently only going to show you a handful. The Rorschach Diagnostic Plate 10. The most common responses, according to Beck, are crab, lobster, spider, and the blue part of the spider. Petrovsky, I cannot pronounce this name. I'm Petrovsky. Peter Paper noticed that crab was really common. 37% focused on spiders and really honed in on the blue. Another like 30-ish% focused on a rabbit head, which I don't know if you can really see here. It's that light green splotch at the bottom. I think this is it. Other kind of foci included caterpillars and worms and snakes. The colorful ones look really cool, but I don't know how well they'll translate on your screen. Okay, projective test. Here's a TAT card. Tat. It's an ambiguous stimuli. You could interpret this as this guy is stopping this lady from leaving, and maybe that indicates that you fear leaving. I'm not trained in the Tat. We have some faculty who are, which is really cool. Debbie Best is trained in it. Or it could be that he's helping her sit down and kind of guiding her to a chair or something like that. It's ambiguous. That ambiguity, like, gives you multiple options. So, what do people do with these projective tests? They're kind of an analysis of the content of the stories, the letters, speeches, all that other stuff, and they're mostly used by clinical psychologists. They provide behavioral data. Okay, it's kind of a little bit of mix of self, a little bit of self because you're like reporting your information, but it's kind of more narrative and story-like and very qualitative and subjective. There are a lot of disadvantages to projective tests. I'm going to talk about the advantages soon, I promise. There are some. Otherwise, I wouldn't include this section at all and be like, projective test, behold. But no, they have some uses. The validity of them evidence is pretty scarce. They're expensive, like they require training and they require a one-on-one with a trained clinician, and so you have to like be either a clinical psychologist, a clinical psychiatrist, or have done like a master's and like have been super trained. There's multiple scoring methods, and doing those requires like multiple people to like rate and evaluate them if you want there to be like any sense of like them being useful. And that's all just like the practical stuff. A psychologist can't really be sure about what they mean because they're subjective. Like, answers can be interpreted differently by different people, even when you have multiple raters. There's a lot of overhead. Often, there are way less expensive tests that work as well or better. So, typically, people use the cheaper, better one. There are some advantages, I swear. They're good for icebreakers, similar to how, like, the Myers-Briggs and some of those kind of really popular but not super scientific tests are, like, used in consulting and in companies and stuff like that. They're good for breaking the ice. So some skilled clinicians, and those tend to be the people that use them, you're able to use them to establish rapport with your client. And also because people really expect to see these because movies, and so they get weirded out if you like don't, or they even ask for it. So you're like, okay, if this helps you feel more comfortable. And so it's a way to like talk to them and like facilitate conversation and ask questions and just get them to trust you, because that's a really important aspect of being a clinical psychologist, according to my clinical psychologist friends and colleagues. And so like you can use this information to like get other stuff out that you wouldn't see like in a regular test, or like no regular test was going to ask. For the two tests that have the most kind of useful oomph to them, like that are worthwhile for the most part, are the Rorschach and the TAT, which is why I talked about them. So the Rorschach is used by 82% of clinicians, at least on occasion, and it may actually be pretty decent for predicting suicide attendance, like for predicting suicide, or attendance at treatment sessions, or commitment to a mental hospital. But those are really only under like really specific clinical settings, which typically is like where the scoring is developed. They can be useful for certain outcomes, and there are certain scoring methods that are more effective, and those scoring methods were developed in the same clinical settings that they're most predictive of, inpatient hospitals, and they're very, very specific things. Now, the TAT's got a shorter form, which is the picture story exercise, which is pretty decent, and shorter is usually cheaper, but also a little less reliable, as we saw. So there's some areas where there's some incremental validity that help like above and beyond other tests, beyond like the easier and simpler tests like the MMPI. Now, how do you evaluate these? So people score differently on projective and objective measures. We'll talk about objective like right after this. Those are like the not Rorschach-y type tests. And so like you can get different scores of the same attributes, that tests are designed to measure the same attributes. And so it's possible that they measure different things. Kind of like projective tests kind of line up with implicit association type tests, where they measure like what people want versus like the explicit, like which is more what objective tests are, like how motives are expressed, kind of like immediate versus like controlled deliberate response. And they also predict different outcomes similar to the IAT, where the implicit version predicts like more like snap judgment-y type things versus the explicit, which predicts things that like you can take a little bit of time and don't have to like make snapping decisions. The need for achievement predicts both like math scores for like more implicit things, but they also predict, when you measure it explicitly, like volunteering for leadership positions. Okay, cool. I'm mindful that like these get long and everybody gets antsy because you're staring at screens all day. So, I'm broken this up. So, I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. And, if I were a YouTuber, I would ask you to like and subscribe and hit the bell icon. You don't have to do that.